What's going on, fam? Just wanted to pop a quick note in before you begin this podcast. You're going to notice that it starts off pretty quickly and jumps right into Spank Bank. And I wanted to make this note really quickly beforehand because when we recorded this podcast, almost immediately we started getting into some really good material. And halfway into, I'm like, holy crap, we need to hit the record button. Like, we're absolutely missing out on an amazing conversation. So we ended up hitting record right in the middle of a deep conversation. But not only that, at the time, it was touching on a conversation and a topic amongst many others that were very kind of personal and also made me uncomfortable. But I realized going through the journey, these were conversations that had to be had. And ultimately, it was okay, got it. This needs to be in it, and let's record this just to make sure that there is context when you go into the conversation and it just all of a sudden says Spank Bank. So when you go in, you've been forewarned, but nonetheless, it is an amazing conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it, and we will see you on the other side. Much love. Peace. So, Spank Bank, and what were you going to say?
So for me, I've recently come into this place of like trying to be unapologetically myself.
Sure.
Like in the midst of always trying to be a people pleaser because I
Sure.
was lacking thereof of self-love, reaching outside of me.
Sure.
I've come to see that like my caricature, Kadeem, how he acts out in order to get attention to feel something. I'm not gonna say whole because you're never whole that way, but in order to feel something, it's like it's built into it. Like literally, I'm sitting with my higher self and I'm looking at a lot of the things I do, and it's like we're so I shouldn't like even listening to you say about why you shouldn't do what you just said. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying? You're like, I should do it under these circumstances. I'm like, but is it you? Like, if that's just where you're at right now, you just wanna it's just where you're at. You can always change. You can always grow from it. Like you said, you whatever had happened and when it was done, you were like, well, that was for nothing. That's part of the lessons, and that's part of being true to yourself. Like living through those things, speaking on those things that you like. People shouldn't hear this, and they're going to feel certain ways. We could have a perfect podcast, not trying to demean anybody, and still find a way to do that to half of our listeners or your listeners, your followers. Following the wolf. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Mm.
you can't. Those things are out of your control. But the realness and authenticness from coming like, yo, we're just regular dudes, and this is what regular dudes talk about. You're gonna connect with those people for a lifetime. Like, I'm in this transformation phase of just forgiving. Like, that's my path from 27 to 28, and I'm just like, I have to have conversations with some of the closest people in my life right now. I had this epiphany the other day off shrooms. I don't know if you want that on there, but I was on a shroom, and I was just like, if I died today, not even really thinking about corona or anything, like where does my soul sit in it all? Like if I had to step up to my higher self and he being like, let's say there was a heaven or hell, or you're gonna go here, you're gonna repeat this cycle, you're gonna transcend, or you're gonna go back to earth because you didn't figure it out. I'm like, there's people close to me that I have done wrong. And how big or small they may see it, I don't know, but I've never laid out the plate or foundation for them to eat off of and have those choices feeding those wolves. I've never gave them that plate of food to have an option of like, do I want to eat this or not? To be mad at me or not? They don't know. It's things that like, or at least in my mind, some of them may not know, some of them may, and just never wanted to confront me on it from where I was as a person, or would it even be worth it, or what would have happened between us? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in that space now where I'm like, how can I be my truest self if I'm not really being my truest self? Like true to me, I've wronged some of the closest people to me in my life, like hands down to my heart. And it's like, wow, that weighs heavy on my soul when I get like when I go deep on it. It really hits me. I'm like, I feel like there's always been something that's kind of holding me from getting to where I need to be going on my journey. Like I'm on the path, don't get me wrong. But I'm like, if I had to say there was one thing left, it would be this. I'm nice to people. I give love. I'm working on receiving more love, like all that good jazz. You know what I'm saying? But this personally with myself, I'm like, I've never confronted. These are going to be the hardest conversations of my life. And literally, someone did it to me. I had a talk with her yesterday, Joanne, the sister I added to the group, the queen. And literally, I'm not going to spill too much on her exact story, but I was a part of it. And between me, her, and a significant other, there was this foundation was built very unsturdy from the start
Mm-hmm.
amongst the three of us. And bad news don't get better with time. So like when it came full fold, I wasn't the first person to know. And I was just like, you know, on my end, I was like, I can't be mad at you for what you did. You deserve that and all. I just wish I could have got a heads up because there's three of us in this. But it wasn't about, it was about her personal growth and where she was at and what she needed to do. And I really couldn't see that at the time from where I was sitting. And I was just like, you know what I'm saying? Like me first. Most people, I wasn't like in my normal ego self, like back in days, like, fuck you, how you gonna do that to me? You know, I was past that, but there was still a level of like, I couldn't visualize where she was at in life yet because I hadn't touched that place of like, man, how do you tell somebody, like, I love you, Wolf, but I've like really done you wrong and never said anything about it. Man, this stems so deep because you met one of the people too, Jules. He'll watch this and like, man, there's some conversations to be had. I can't really say too much over this, but brings tears to my eyes, man. It's like, you know, your hope as an individual delivering that message is like, damn, I hope they can see where I'm at and the person I've grown to be and trying to see how much I've changed and how much it takes of a person to come at you and be like, yo, I'm wrong. I did you wrong, whether you know it or not. Like, I've wronged you. And like, some people look at me in a pretty good light, some people don't, but nah, I feel like I've been built up and personified in this 3D reality to a lot of people for this so set downfall. I wouldn't see it as a downfall, but most people will. It's just a minor setback of something you have to go through to grow. Mm-hmm. But like, most people are gonna look at it, it's like you looking at Michael Jackson when they tried to like say he was messing with kids, whether he was or not, neither here nor there. But like, people are like, Michael Jackson, no way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like the people I've encountered in my life who look to me in certain ways, in a certain light, like, damn, I love that dude. They might be taken back by it, you know? And I don't think a lot of people are gonna get it at first. It took me 3 years to get here now from what she did 3 years ago. She was 27 at the same time. She's 30 now. We had this conversation. I'm just like, there's no irony, there's no coincidences. Like, look at this. I'm turning 27, you turned 27 when you did this. And she's sitting here now like, you know, that was just the beginning part for her. This becomes a stampede kind of. You can't just confront one thing and then just like not talk to the other guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's still a job half-assed done. So like, for me, it's just the beginning. I started with Osiris sitting there with my dog and just like, damn, you know, like he didn't sign up for this, but I don't get to play with him as much. You know, I started off like in the hills of Arizona, climbing mountains with him as a puppy, to swimming in the beaches all by himself off leash, like a free dog, to being like sheltered in New York, snowed in most of the time and not really wanting to go outside just because of the weather. You know what I'm saying? Like, and him as a puppy, he's like, damn, we were having so much fun, but now we're here. So, you know, I apologize to him for that. I'm like, I'm not in Okie vibes when I'm sitting in the house cold and meditating all the time. Like, it's not there. I feel a set of peace, but as forthcoming with the unconditional love just spilling out, it's not always there for me as a human. I've come to just like find this middle area of like what the Buddhists talk about, of just non-attachment. You know, not too happy for this or not too sad about this, just right in the middle. And that's a kind of awkward place when most people are not there. You know what I'm saying? Like, my brother gets it. The people who get these things with you are where you build some of the craziest bonds. And that's, for me, is why I'm always so open to people and open-minded people, because I'm like, some people might get me. I might meet a dude today and he gets me on the depths of what I'm talking about on that Buddhist stuff that none of my closest friends that I've known for years or that I've just bonded with, knowing, you know, not as long, but we're super tight. He might get me on that depths that like no one's ever heard. And I'm just like, that, to know, when you speak about being alone and feeling alone in this world, to know that there's someone in those depths of your darkness where you lie, sitting by yourself, that gets you, is very fulfilling. You know, just knowing they get it in a certain sense. Like, that alone is a connection of not being alone. And if you feel it, then that's proof to me somebody else does. And that this is all connected under some interconnected consciousness web that we all can get to a certain extent, but we're just in different parts of the spectrum. So for me, like just stepping back to those conversations, I have always confronted it deep down on some of my psychedelic trips, but I've always known myself to be a man of my word to the best of my ability. And sitting there pondering on these thoughts, my higher self speaking to Kadeem, I'm like, man, I know, like the God said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. When you know that what you speak creates your reality and makes worlds, like literally you see it, when you're in that higher self and you're really watching that, you're like, I know if I say this, I have to do this. Like that's where I was at in my head. I've always gotten there and I'm just like, I'm going to do it. And then the trip dies down and I just like kind of go around ignorant again.
Been there a couple times.
Just trying to cover it up and put sparkles on it and act like nothing happened. But this time I sat there and I was like, say the words. I was like, say the words. You know where you're at in your life. You say it. You have to hold yourself to it. I was like, this is my year for forgiveness. From 27 to 28, I've told myself I will have all of those difficult conversations with those people before I turn 28 out loud. And I feel a lot of different things about it. Partially scared, but not an all-encompassing fear, just more so like, I know I see the brighter view at the end of it. Some of them may get to it, some of them may not. I mean, I've got to it, so I have faith that those seeds will be planted and sowed and they will reap over time. Like a lot of them are just not going to get it at first. And I just have to be okay with that. I can't have any attachment to it. Just like, I have to at least know I did my part. So at the end of this, for me and my higher self, saying that I'm a true being and I am standing in that light, I will feel whole in that. Yeah, so I'm excited to say the least. This much fear, this much excitement.
You were tying that all to the original point that was made before we started the recording. We were talking about I was mentioning the masturbation piece and how
there is no right or wrong.
So well, I mean, there's only inherently right and wrong because we said so, because reality is reality and there's what we say about reality. I got that. On a conceptual level, like I'm very, very familiar with the whole concept of wrong and right is something that we create in our heads to try and create some meaning, to put some peace in our mind that, okay, now that I've been able to put this inside of a box, I can move on because the uncertainty in my head is what causes me this anxiety. And I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling of uncertainty. I don't like that feeling of not knowing. But for me, let's just say that right now I'm going to take all of this and put this in the podcast, which a very like scared part of me doesn't want to. I'm just going to be front. Like,
I feel you. I feel you. When somebody gets you on those depths, I feel you. I see you, as my friend would say. I see you, bro.
Here's one of the things that I was most excited for and most scared about when doing this podcast is that I knew what the main intention was to create such a ridiculous level of raw vulnerability and honest conversations that were designed to really help people to be seen and to know that where they were at is they're not alone. Like everything that you were saying, it really is about that. And at the same time, there was also the knowing that I was going to have to confront some things that I'm deeply petrified and terrified of, which, for example, before we start this conversation, we're talking about like urges and masturbation and how like I've been doing pretty decent, but like there was one time, a little while ago where I did, and I was like watching porn, and then I got pretty much all the way through. And then I was just like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Like, this isn't enjoyable. I'm not enjoying this. And also like from a, higher consciousness perspective, like I'm also like objectifying and belittling a woman. And then you're like, oh man, just use like your, just use your mental spank bank. Just like go up here and use that. And I'm just, and in my head, I'm just like, well, this as well as it comes into play with like psychedelics and things like that. I'm like, oh, but this is like really ugly stuff. And like, I'm afraid that if people start hearing this, like it turns them off. Cause it's like, oh, you're just at least this is the story that I make up. It's like, oh, you're just another guy. Like you have these cravings, you have these urges and you act on them. It's just like, I'm a human. And what I'm afraid of is that certain part. Yeah, I know. I got that. Again, like here's what I'm battling between. It's between the higher part of my consciousness that intellectually understands it and the part of me that's still catching up. That's like the scared little inner child that wants to be in alignment with his full higher self, but knows that if I do this, rather as I'm doing this, that it requires me to have conversations with people that I love and care about. And it scares me because of the deep rooted ties. Most of it, quite frankly, is with my friends and my family. Actually, less my friends, more my family, because of the deep Christian roots that we have. Like, what if they know, like, let's just say my family members watch this one day and
they'd be some of the first people I'd show personally. That's me. Like where I'm at now. I don't. It didn't happen overnight. I will tell you that. But it's just like after you start mingle and do all the BS, you fighting through the 3D. You're like, I can no longer play stupid to any of that. Like, hey, let's see who really loves me. Let's see what's really unconditional. You know what I mean? Then you have to challenge, their mind and where they're going to go with it at that time. And it may not be positive immediately. Most of the times it's not, but what can reap and grow out of it. And if you have that faith, like, you just wait for it. When you watch it happen, you're like, whoa, that was worth it. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was worth putting myself under the bus, self being this ego that we die and transcend this body. Like, who really cares? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we hold way too much attachment to all this, unfortunately, and most people are not going to like that line. And it's like, it takes some coming and getting around to, but when you get it, you're like, holy fuck, that dude was just being true. Like, he was just, I couldn't see it at the time from where I was standing, a little too far. That dude was just speaking something that wasn't ready for, but it sparked something in my brain to think back on it now. Like, damn, had I never heard it then, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at right now. Like, I think this is your podcast. This is sacred work you're doing in the first place, and I honor you for that, like taking this step in this plunge. But for me, this is where this is going, and I hope more of your conversations will go like this. And you have to understand, I see you as a very different person. We're all one, but you as your unique being, everything we kind of got template and made in our head is kind of what we've seen before. And you think about, I like the concept of, like, when I speak about motivational speakers, you're like, no, I'm more like a life teacher. Is that what you?
I don't like the term life coach because it's so overly tossed around, but my whole thing is wanting to provide a space for people to guide themselves back to themselves by, facilitating that. So whatever the name for that is.
So you're already on, like, your sacred space, yogi journey walker, like, you're taking people back home in a state of remembrance is what I call it, because we just forget shit as life goes along.
That's what yep.
That's it. Don't expect your work to look like anybody else's. And this is for starters, like, you never saw a podcast probably like this. Some people get into some kind of shit, but I would say I haven't seen a podcast where they're talking about openly masturbation and just like, hey, this is what it is. I'm not trying to cover this up. Like, most dudes do it. It's called being human. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. Most of those people probably won't like it at first, and then will get it later. Like, but they needed to hear from you to even know that they thought they didn't like it, but they really do, because it was the truth. Like, some people just in some spaces, constructs, what you were talking about, we're building these boxes. All of this is constructs, man. Like, made up shit. Seriously. Yeah.
I'm in alignment with it. This is just the part of the journey that I'm in. Essentially, what you're doing is you're forcing something, not forcing something, but it's like you're kind of like nudging something that I already know is going to happen. And it's just one of those things where it's just like, oh shit, like, is this the conversation? Because here's what happens. So, like, for example, like, initially, and this was another thing that kind of came up for me when I was doing this, was the population that I was kind of being initially thinking I was going to serve was going to be like, high schoolers, college age. And then the distance for me, the fear that came up was, well, if that's the population I'm going to start serving, and then their parents start listening to this podcast, that's an automatic not alignment, because they're like, oh, this kid is talking about X, Y, and Z on his podcast. He's talking about, psychedelics. He's talking about masturbation. He's talking all these things. So all of a sudden now it's like, well, shit, I probably have to start doing a real review of who it is that I'm really wanting to serve, which I know that the people that I'm really serving, who I'm called to serve, isn't necessarily the kid who has everything kind of figured out from his parents or managing everything. It's usually the kid that's feeling a bit uncertain and lost, or in general, just people who are feeling like that. Either they're lost, they don't have that full identity that's formed, or they're just like, man, like, I could really use a space where there's people who get me. And this is what this is all about. Like, you and I, like, we get each other in a way that it's like, I can do, say, be anything, and you're going to love me exactly as I am. And that's really what this was designed to be. It's how can we feel safe, right? How can I come out of my cavern that I've been hiding in? Because there's this part of me that I'm so deeply afraid that if people see that, then I will be deemed unlovable, or I won't be accepted as I am. It's the leaving the known world of all of the friends, family, places, things that I've done, and now stepping into this new place where it's like, I'm looking down that way. There's not a single light. It's completely pitch black. I know what I want, but I'm deeply terrified. How do I fulfill upon that, and also like not completely piss off everyone that's already in my known world? And ironically, I'm walking myself through this path. I have coaches, I have mentors, like I'm taking myself through this, but it's about creating that safe space. And at the same time, it's terrifying for me because I'm going through my own process of that. It's, the first thing that happened when I started this podcast was I was like, I knew what was going to happen was there was going to be like cursing, and there's probably going to be like conversations that come up that would be questionable in the constructs of my family and things like that. And I was just like, I wonder how I'm going to approach it. And then like on the first episode, there was cursing. I was just like, okay, that box is checked. That was really quick. Like, I don't know how I thought it was going to be avoided, but like cursing happened. I was like, all right, well, I guess that's going to be part of the show now. There's going to be cursing. And then like the second episode, and I had a guy come on talking about plant medicine. I was just like, and this is exactly what I was afraid of. Not because I didn't want it to happen, or even that I did want it to happen. It was just like, this is probably where the podcast is heading. Is it's like going to be extremely deep. It's going to be very raw, and it's going to automatically push away a certain group of people, which, to me it's kind of sad, because it's like, I really was hoping that it would be available to a larger audience. But as soon as you start talking about certain topics, you automatically, you excommunicate certain areas, at least in my mind you do, because it's just not in their sphere. It's not a part of their own code. And that's okay. Like, I can
How do
think
you know? That's how I always, it's like, all of it's just hearsay. Like off rip, yeah, they're probably not gonna like it. But when we start thinking like that, like at least when I get in my mind, I don't really do it. Oh, 3:33, my time. Man.
That's actually my time too. Look at that. Boom.
But yeah, when I start thinking like that, I'm like, yo, as this human being, this caricature, you're not God. Like in that sense, like you just don't have that mind doesn't have control over all those factors. You never will. It's just impossible. But from your higher self perspective, you're like, man, this is where you start testing your trust and your faith in that there's something higher and that it will pan out. You know what I mean? Like we're always trying to take that path that's like, that's rocky. I don't really want to go that way. And it's like, that's usually the way that nobody wants to go. And when you go at people who see it are just like, damn, he's really doing that. That stems something in them. Like that sparks something in them. You were talking about the children, that demographic. The kids might be listening to it. Parents might hear. I feel like for the most part, yeah, parents are not going to like it. But they'll never really sit back and question why, unless they're asked. I feel like the conversations are something on their part that needs to be had with their children, but they just never get to it. And since they fault at it, it's just like, shouldn't be talked about. It's like, no, like parents should be telling their kids about weed and, plant medicine and about sex and what's life like out there, not trying to just shelter them. And then when they hit the real world, it's like anxiety, stress, depression. like, yo, just keep it real from the start. Parents, I'm not a parent, so I mean, this is just a very one-sided, and I could be wrong, but I feel that view that they take, that they're trying to be so protective, ends up pushing them into places that they didn't want them to go. And either way, either direction, the kids are going to make choices that the parents don't like. But I'd rather just like, yo, go be you, and then just see what happens. Like, go with the world, make choices. But I don't want you to have that voice in your head like, mom says I shouldn't. Nah, don't. I know that voice that plays in my head. I know that plays in most people's. I would never want to do that to a child. Like that shelters their creativity, their expression in a certain manner. And this could be some of the greatest artists in the world, but still having setbacks just because of that parental factor of like just these thoughts. If they didn't have that mental block, how much further they could go and express and connect and reach out to the rest of, the whole. I'm just like, you want to do something? Go ahead. Like, because I've been there. Like, this is where I'm at now. Before, I would have been like, nah, they shouldn't, they this and that. There's this Chinese proverb. I loved it when I heard it. And I think the people are going to love it. It's called, who knows what's good or bad? So there was this Asian man. He lived at his house and had a horse that lived in the back. and his horse ran away. And three of his neighbors came over the next day and knocked on his door and was like, yo, we're sorry about what happens to your horse. Damn, like, we wish that didn't happen to you. And he's like, who knows what's good or bad? That's literally what he says to them. They leave. A couple days later, the horse comes back with 13 or so wild horses. And now he has his horse, or 13 plus 13 wild other horses. And his neighbors see that, they're like, wow, man, it's awesome. Like, your horse came back with a bunch of other horses. Now you have a bunch of horses. Like, that's awesome. That's amazing. He's like, who knows what's good or bad? And then his son, his oldest son, ends up riding one of these wild horses, falls off, and breaks his leg. Neighbors hear about it, they come over, and they're like, we're sorry about your son. He's in the hospital with a broken leg. Oh my gosh, that sucks. And he's like, who knows what's good or bad? All of a sudden, their country ends up going to war, and they're drafting, and they end up coming to his door, and they're like, all the oldest sons of the fathers of the parents has to go to war. That's over 18. He's like, well, my son has a broken leg. Like, that's kind of just how it ends. Like, it's one of those things that it was like, it really opened my eyes, because at first you're just like, damn, that's bad, off rip of whatever the people are telling you. You know what I'm saying? And then 2 weeks later, it's like, well, what was perceived to be bad is now a good thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just never really know. So for us to just make those calls where we're standing, and where we're standing is usually around about who we're surrounded by, because we usually think like the circle. Yeah, you come to see it, it's like, damn. Yeah, like, this is where like a lot of the deep work, inner work, really gets to show you your higher self. You can discern what's you and what's this made up part that's just been pulling pieces. When you spend a good amount of time by yourself, you're like, well, these are some fresh thoughts. Never had these before.
Mm-hmm.
You start getting away from people. It's finding that good balance of like isolation, which is usually your meditation and your work, and then a good round around people, and you really get this discernment. But if you're constantly and you get these thoughts, and you're like, you thinking they're your thoughts. That's my thoughts. Oh, they say that's bad. That's bad. It's like, and then growing with life experiences, moving, meeting different people, cultures, etc. You're like, whoa. A lot of what you think and believe is just dependent on where you're born and raised, who you're around. Like, literally, there's a culture that like celebrates death in Africa. They look forward to it from the day they're born. No joke. Their kids are growing up like, can't wait to die. Like, no joke. Like, literally, they celebrate it. They celebrate their dead, everything. Yet here in America, it's like, death. Nobody wants to talk about it. Like, nobody wants to go there. It's like this, what's that term? What's that term they use? Taboo. It's like taboo. Talk about the inevitable. Like, that don't really make no sense.
Did you ever watch the movie Sausage Party?
Oh, of course.
Dude,
what you got? Because I got something to say, but what you got?
I mean, that entire movie was so brilliantly written, and if you're listening and you didn't like the movie, you got to watch it again and actually pay attention, because that movie went so deep. And I need to watch it again, because yes, it was hilarious, and yes, it was extremely effed up by every stretch. Like, the movie was so jacked, it was so fucked. Yeah. And at the same time, there's something really funny about the whole concept of, foods being a grocery store, and they're singing in the morning, and good day, it's no, I can't remember the song, dear God, so that's what it's, dear God. Like, there's like a whole, they wake up and they're like praising the gods, like, oh, it's gonna be so great, we're going to the great beyond. And then, Honey Mustard comes back, it's all bullshit, it's all a lie, like, the great beyond's a lie. Like, go to the frozen section, and he like goes and talks to Firewater, the native,
the three different like Native American, African of the sort, and like Caucasian, in a sense, like the three different
the elders of their own race and privilege, so to speak. And the bun goes to the frozen section or whatever, and he sees what's happening there. And then, like, you see parts of movies where the groceries get picked up and they're getting checked out, and they're like, oh god, total spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie. Well, it's been like years.
Let's save the movie.
You're so late. Like, honestly, you're so late if you haven't watched the movie. Just go watch it. Like, even me saying this doesn't give away even half the movie. But
not even close.
They go back, and then it's complete and total different from the reality that they expected. It's like this real effed up place and everything, and it ends up having not exactly the most like peaceful resolutions, but to a certain degree, they're we're so bred to be fearful of the unknown, and like that to me is like the biggest thing that's like causing. I think that the fear of everything that's going on in the world, with everything corona and just in general fear, the fear is actually probably more likely to have more of an impact than the virus itself.
Hmm.
From the, I mean, just think about like they said that there's, domestic abuse and things like that is like crazy, like people being home, like, beating on one another, just being verbally, physically abusive. Like that's one thing. Like obviously depression, anxiety are going to be rampant. People aren't going outside, spending that time. Like, and not to mention like even the people who aren't affected and the ones who are like really strapped into the media isn't designed to inform people. It's designed to get ratings. It's not objective nearly as it is about making sure that we drop a hot line on you like a rapper does a hot verse and make sure we got your attention long enough for you to listen to the whole thing. And at that point, your adrenals, your sympathetic nervous system is completely just like buzzing out of your entire body, and you don't know what to
Fight or
do.
flight mode,
Your
sitting in your own house.
your thoughts are fighting your own thoughts, like straight up wall of death style, just running at each other, and just it's no bueno.
So for me, I'm like, there used to be an old self of me that just be like, that's no good. That can't be good. And then there was a part of me when I was finding myself where I'm like, well, that is good, And then there's a part of me that's just like, yo, that just is. Like, you have to understand some of those people are gonna lose it. Probably another touchy subject, probably commit suicide. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a part of it. Some people they'll just go past this time, wasting as time as they usually do, and then go back to doing what they were doing. And then there's some people who are like forced to face themselves, forced to see their mirrors of the individuals they choose to be around. So you're saying relationships, arguing. It's like, yo, y'all probably really didn't like each other for a good while, but you've been
This
working
ain't
so
new.
no, you've been working so much, like you don't get the time to actually sit down when you're not doing something. It's like, let's go out, let's fuck, eat and sleep, and go, you know what I mean? Like, there's no really like, let's just sit together and see if we could even talk, if that's manageable. You know what I'm saying? But
Nope.
some people are going to be forced to do that. And I look at the beautiful side of that, like, man, some of those people are going to get to grow together and apart. But either way, each one of those individuals will be growing towards them higher selves and being authentic. Like, I really don't want that. And that person probably really didn't want that either. And we went our separate ways, and now we're happier going our separate ways, or we're working together now and, building, actually just like not passing the time and getting ready to make baby machines like Jews. I was watching a show about Jews. What it was saying, the reason that they have so much children is because they're trying to replenish from what they've lost, from the concentration camps. That's why y'all just spitting babies out. Like, that don't, for me in my world, that don't make sense as an intention and a reason to do that. But I'm like, hey, your world, it ain't wrong. It ain't me. Like, I don't really get it, to be honest. But that's even something that I wouldn't mind sitting down with an actual hardcore Jew that's been one forever, lived that life, and actually just talk about it. Help me get some understanding. I see how they're propagating and using the word of God and how it's being bended, but that's always a thing. So can't really blame that for you walking around in the world and acting like you don't see other different stuff, and it's just this. I'm like, you'd have to really sit me down and give me your world. Let me see your world. That'd be interesting. Sausage Party, I wanted to comment on that real quick. When I watched Sausage Party, I was in Arizona at the time, so you were probably around that time in California. You might have seen it earlier. I'm not sure when it came out, but I know when I seen it, I was in AZ. And in my past relationship, once I moved out there, it was kind of done for us, and I was spending a lot of time doing deeper inner work on LSD, liquid acid, just really going there with myself, trying to find out what was what for me. And I remember asking, like, just sitting there, and I'm like, I'm surrounded by people that I love / love me, my brother, and that person at the time. I'm not gonna be dropping people's names, but I asked that person, I'm like, I knew we was in a discord in very different places, but there would be certain things I would ask just to solidify what I thought, to make sure I'm just not crazy. I'm like, no, we're really in two different places right now. Like, I don't see how we can be in a relationship as two people that think completely opposite. I was like, what is Sausage Party? What is that movie about? She's like, just a bunch of like sausages and stuff having sex and orgies and just stupid and funny. I'm like, that's what you got out of that? we watched that movie together. Like, this wasn't several times. We sat down and watched that movie together. And when she said that to me, I really had to just sit back and was like, you want to talk about feeling alone and lost? I'm like, this is one of the closest people I got to me that loves me right now on a day-to-day that I'm seeing. This is what I think. This is what they think. I was like, does life really have you by the horns that bad? Like, I know working sucks. I will admit that. So I serve. I know what it's like to, like, man, people complain about jobs. I'm talking about take you to another country for a few months. You want to talk about turning your world upside down, like not seeing women for months on end. You know, any kind of like being yelled at, being treated like absolute dirt, whatever. You know what I mean? I've had that fair share. And then for people to complain about jobs, like they would take our weekends sometimes. Like, oh, you're just gonna be out in the field, or you just have to watch this. Like, people, at least you got a set schedule of knowing, like, I work this time to this time. For them, it's like, oh, you never know what's coming. You always got to be on your toes. That shit kept me in a fight or flight for years. Like, people think PTSD just comes from war. I'm sure I had small amounts of it before I joined, and then going into the military just made it worse. Because what you're looking for is a grown-up babysitter, at least at my point. From where I look back and reflect on it, I was looking for somebody to do kind of what mommy was doing, but just pay me and stuff instead. Like, they give you housing and they pay you money, and then you just run out in the world and do whatever nonsense you're doing, trying to figure out shit. But then they also just take away your time, and just, you're on this. I ain't trying to bash the Army, just wasn't for me, or the military. It may work for some people. Some people may need that structure. Certain free spirits, though, something never sat right with me from like day one. But it was like, what are my friends gonna think? What's my mom and family gonna think if I didn't plan on going to college? So I'm like, what are you gonna think if I just sit at home? And my mom's probably gonna push me out at a certain point, because I know how she is. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta go. My mom's been on her own since she was 16. Like, had my sister at like 17, and then me at 25. Like, she's like, her mom didn't give her any help, you know? And I'm like, it's real. It gets real. Me mending my relationship with my mother so I can learn to love myself, a woman, everybody around me better. That shit starts for me there. And that's another place that I'm at in my journey, and I've been working at for the last year. Because you trying to have conversations with a parent that's not seeing your viewpoint, not saying you're right or they're right, but you're at least accepting and opening and have tried their way, and they're not even a least bit receptive to yours because they've been doing theirs for so long. Like, I'm like, I understand we don't see this eye to eye, but can you look at it my way? And it's like, I'm like, I've tried your way. School, college, all of that. I'm like, I'm not even against college. I think college is something that'll come from me later years. I just wasn't in a place for it. I would have wasted time. I'm looking at where I'm getting focused, and more of like what I'm doing things for, helping others, selfless work, stuff that'll push you through. Not just like, I want to impress my mom or dad and get a degree because that'll make them happy. I'm like, what kind of life is that? What about you? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's always this fine line between dreams, your dreams, and what they prescribed it to be for you. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And like I keep telling my significant other right now, my partner, my queen, Janelle, I'm like, what life really boils down to for me is choice. Like, and it's so ironic because the Bible talks about, like, when they ate from, when he made man, he gave them free will. So it's funny how it meets up for me. I'm like, right now, like, everything you do, as the guy I was having a conversation with her, I was like, there's always going to be that shinier or that ass or this lady, you know what I mean? There's, no, for real. That ass of all of us.
You don't walk by. It's like the GIF you see on Instagram where it's like the guy's walking next to his girlfriend, and like his head's like turned back and looking at this one girl like looking all good and done up, and his girlfriend's all like, huh? Like looking at him like, what are you looking at? Like, clearly that ass right there.
For real. I'm lucky enough so that me and my partner could look at that together, and it would just be like, yeah, like, let's really just give appreciation for the nice booty that just walked by. We both love to squeeze. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's cool that we can go there. These are the kind of things you discern when you're like dating a person. Like, would this be okay before we start dating? Because these things don't stop. And that's the conversation we were having. I was like, there's always going to be something shinier. But every man at a certain point gets to a certain level of maturity where it's like, he wakes up every day and he, one, chooses to be with you, and two, chooses not to step outside of his trust with himself, clearly, and then the trust between you guys. You do the second, clearly you broke the first. So, like, for me, I'm just like, that doesn't stop. And she gets that, but I'm like, it's hard to explain that, like, man, it's for her being a, I said, like, I love that she's a good woman. And that was one thing that didn't really completely resonate. And I probably wasn't explaining it the best way, but I'm like, for me, that's big. It sounds simple to the rest of the world. For me, where I'm at right now, for you to be a good woman, you can't pay for that. Like, most people can't find somebody to match with, to talk about, to even hold a conversation. I'm like, you're just a great woman. I've never met anybody like you. I would like to build with you and have you in my life. You know what I'm saying? And for her, it was more like being chosen. She wanted to be like the chosen one. And I'm like, in my mind, every time somebody was what I believed was the chosen one, they weren't. This is a very different view I have on it, where I'm just like, it's not settling. It's just, I'm trying something different so I could get a different result.
Sure.
Didn't pick this partner based off of like, man, the sex is good, which it is now. But besides the point, I'm like, she's a great woman. Like, why would you give that up? What if you don't get that again? Like, you know what I mean? Like, stuff like this doesn't come so many times in a life, if even once. You know, most people don't even get to see this opportunity. I'm like, being a great woman is like number one for me right now. So like, if I have a choice between having a great woman that I've never met, or never met any kind of energy similar to this in my life, or having a one night with that looked like that, I'm like, I've done that a lot before. Not saying it wouldn't be good, but it's not worth this. I've never had this before. Like, why would I give that up? Like, this is priceless. You can't put money on it. She's seen me at some of my lows. Following up on the forgiveness tip of talking to him, I had a conversation with her that I can't get into too much steps on, but it had to stem from when I came down to Florida with you, which is like, it's all crazy how it connects, because I also told you the other person is Jules that I have to talk to, which you met down there. Like, and I wanted to have that conversation then, and it was just like, your mind, your ego, yourself will always find a good reason to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, don't do it today, do it tomorrow. Or, it's not worth talking about that.
Really
And
gotta
then it
go
was
and do
like,
yoga now. I gotta be spiritual. I gotta go do something.
yeah, it had that point where it was like, I was gonna do it. I could feel the buildup. And then the second I was about to, he came out and told me something relating to it, of really caring and loving. I was like, holy fuck, I can't do this. I can't. I literally like shut down, man. I was like, damn. Like, why right now? Why'd you have to tell me that? I think you were there too. You told us both that. But yeah, that's probably like, he's number one on my list for hardest conversation. I have like an order of hardest to least hardest in my mind. But yeah, I had mines with, my partner that night, and she was coming up on a mushroom too. She had came home, and she was coming up probably to like around the peak at when I decided to have this conversation. And I knew it was going to be rough, and I knew it was going to be all that it was. But I was like, well, this is the start to saying you're going to do what you said you're going to do. And I was like, well, while we were together as a couple, I've never stepped outside of that trust. But there's other ways I feel I've deceived you and withheld certain information prior to us, even though we weren't titled or being together. Like, we were clearly a thing, and I feel like I stepped outside of that. Didn't even actually do anything, but my intentions in what I was doing was just wrong and wasn't sitting right with me. I'm just sitting there after it all, like, wow, is this really where I'm at right now? I could have never pictured myself looking at things or being this way ever in my past. like I've never. People ask to draw a picture, and I'm like, this wouldn't have been it at all, not even close. But I've loved it all. That's the beautiful part about it. I've trusted the whole journey, and where it has brought me is to such a nice place, man. Such a peaceful place. Like, once I open up the lid on all of this, I would have had these conversations already if I didn't feel they needed to be had in person. Like, I'm like, yo, just kick it real old school. Like, if a father from back in the days was telling you now, he'd let you know, like, yo, you got something you need to tell them, you tell them to their fucking face. Excuse my French. That's probably the only curse I'm gonna drop on this. I don't really personally more, but like for real, you be a man about that. Because it's easy to just hide behind a text or like even a call. It's like, nah, I want to see you face to face. Do you want to hit me? I mean, I'm not into fighting. I'm not about no violence, but like if you felt the need, I'm in that place of like, I get it. I get it. And I hope one day you'll get it. Like you'll sit back and be like, damn, he did me wrong. I punched that dude in the face and he didn't do jack. Like that, I don't know. It won't, for me, I don't see how somebody can overlook that their whole life. In the anger, immediately, for quite some time, hold on to it, yeah. But I'm thinking if I ever reflect back on something like that a couple years ago, damn, I love that dude. We were so close to tell me this, boom. And then that happened, that would come back to me and just be like, that was such a, I didn't expect, one, for him to do that, and two, for him to not respond after I did something like that. I don't think anybody in the world would do that. Like, I don't know anybody who would do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it takes a certain kind of person. When I know, like, it's my higher self and this dude's just serving, I'm like, well, he's done some dumb stuff. He's got to make up for it. Like, he makes his bed as lies. And he, I guess, in certain people's eyes, would get what he deserves. But it's like just all a part of it. You know what I'm saying? Karma Dharma stuff.
Yeah, it's a little bit relentless. It doesn't it shows no mercy for the weak. I've had those conversations internally about like the list of people that I know that I haven't necessarily done the best by. Fortunately, I think for the most part, I haven't done anything too crazy off the end towards people to where it's like, I'm like, oh man, that's going to be real bad. Most of it's just like apologizing for like my shortcomings, especially as we came in like relationships and playing out like unconscious and subconscious patterns of loneliness and abandonment, and how what that looks like in terms of from a chakra perspective. I actually recently looked this up because I've been like going through this healing process of healing loneliness and abandonment. And when I looked it up, it was so funny. It's like if your root chakra's off, you're likely to struggle with knowing how you feel and your emotions, and feeling lonely, feeling abandoned, having difficulty communicating how you feel, coming off hot in a relationship, but then shortly afterwards, like starting to put distance. And also,
withdraw, pull back. Like, oh, too much love.
mhm.
Trust me, I know. I've been there, brother.
I looked at every single one of them. I was just like, check, 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 check. There wasn't one of them I didn't check off. I was just like, damn. That's like, I felt like I was looking in a mirror right back at myself. And I started like thinking about the relationships that I had in the past where, don't get me wrong, like I always relate to myself as being like the awesome boyfriend that parents are going to miss, because like I truly do try to show up that way. Like it just am like I'm like super cool with the parents. I always try to make them, like, be cool with them and everything. And
Yeah.
something that I know about myself is that I had a tendency, because of the fear of abandonment, I didn't know this, and loneliness, is that I would come in and like things would be great, but then at a certain point something would happen in my brain neurologically, just like way behind my own conscious awareness, where I would start putting them to a distance. I'd start get wandering eyes, and I wouldn't be as invested as a relationship as possible. And then I would distract myself. I would go and I'd work more, or I would put myself in, I would go and I'd work out more. I'd do whatever to not really have to deal with what was there. And ultimately I didn't know. But I realized that it caused people pain in the process. It caused hurt. It caused grief. It caused sadness. Hell, if they didn't really get full opportunity to process it, like there's a possibility that that pain could have been dragged into the next relationship in one way or another. Like I take responsibility for that. Like for me to be at my highest expression is to acknowledge that what I did could very well have a rippling impact in that person's next relationship. If they develop trust issues, what that's on them. Like it's, it is for them to do the work. However, I'm the one that sparked that. Then
It was needed to, it was necessary, but yeah.
It's all necessary. None of it's bad, none of it's good, but still at the same time, got to take responsibility for my part.
Of course.
Still have to, own that, because it's easy to throw shade, be ugly, do nasty things to somebody, and do the whole like, oh, that's just the karma, that's just how it be, like, nothing on me. But
Nah.
if you truly cared about that person, which I still
truly care about yourself. I said, if you truly care about yourself, knowing that you are one with them, only separate by this, but like we said, mirrors, reflections, like when you know you are that person, you're like, damn, if the shoe was on the other foot,
it would suck.
Yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? You would hope that they would own up to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they would, it might not give you whatever you wanted, but you might just feel a little bit better, like, damn. Or you might get inspired, or might just be like, damn, that takes a certain kind of person. Yeah, we are definitely given some of the hardest challenges, but for good reason, because I think we can measure up. That's what excites me about our tribe, man. I love the wolf.
It's, man, like the journey of, call it self-discovery, call it self-awareness, call it, move to the next level of consciousness, or whatever the hell you want to call it, even just call it like, just becoming more in tune with yourself. It
Call
is
it.
just call it it's all it. But why do we waste time with language? We should all just be telepathically speaking at this point. It's such a waste of time, this whole
With
language
this,
thing. Just
with Asian eyes and just like beaming you message.
I know what you're thinking. Yes, I want some Chipotle. Let's go. Wasting my time using all these words. Yes, I want to Netflix and chill right now, lay down and watch a movie and not have anything to do.
Sometimes I like really, I believe we both do such a great job with staying busy that the time that we do get to do that, it makes it so much more worthwhile.
Well,
like I really don't feel bad. I'm like, I earned this.
I don't give myself that time as much as I'd like to say that I do, because almost all of it is towards like growth all the time. So even like if I were to sit down and watch Netflix, of course I did watch Rick and Morty, but even then I'm like, that's challenging my brain. But like even the Netflix I want to watch is like Joe Dispenza, like learning how to rewire my brain and stuff like that. So it's the time when I actually have no agenda and nowhere to be. And to me, the greatest use of like my free time now is just like if I could just hang out with some friends and just like flow and move my body and everything. Even that to me is like still like growth. There's very little that I put in that I don't see some kind of result or impact on. But now more than ever, it's just what I feel like my soul wants and needs is more time to be and not have to feel like I have to do. Like, oh, I'm doing my rituals and working out and everything. Like, yes, that like supports me, my growth and everything, but it's something that I have to, I have to be disciplined about. Like I have to be on top of it. Like every single day at 6:30 when that alarm goes off, my ass is going to be out there working out, like rain, cold, like heat. Like there's no excuses
Tornado.
for tornado. Like I'll be out there. All of it. Corona's out there. I'm still out there keeping my social distance practice on, like, doing what I got to do. But
shaking hands with Corona. We got a deal, a record deal.
Yeah, you don't mess with me, I don't mess with you. That's the handshake. You stay back. But it's a trivial journey at best, all of it. It's like walking around with a blindfold on all the time, hoping that one can maintain some semblance of peace throughout it. Because for me, it's like I don't need to be on a high all the time, just like floating and just like I don't need to be that. But just as you mentioned, like being able to just have like peace, like being able to have like a sustained.
That is the high. That is the high.
That's just like the greatest experience is just being able to just breathe in, woosah, let go, and be like, I'm not only am I going to be all right, but I'm more than all right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm already all right. Just aligning with it.
Just sometimes we be forgetting.
Yo, constant loop of remembrance, man. Like I feel like, so I'm gonna share some of my theories on here. I call it the baby geniuses. I believe that at birth, we're born knowing everything.
I'm actually on that class as well. I think it's on Udemy.
What? What are you talking about?
No, you said you're on board with that, and I was just like, oh, I'm on board. I'm taking that class too. It's on Udemy.
Okay. Is it really, or are you just joking?
I was making that up.
Yeah. I'm like, man, you ever look at babies? They look like they know everything. They stare at people with good energy, like they're looking at their auras, at least to me. Like I know when I come into contact with kids, it's just always like, and I'm like, granted, I'm Black, but it ain't always that. You know what I'm saying? They like, this nigga knows. He knows that I know that he knows. Like they looking at me like that. And I'm like, I got you figured out. And I think through the conditioning.
I see you.
Yeah.
Pulls
yeah,
he pulls the avatar like, I see you.
I see you. Yeah. Through learning our ways, this material ways, 3D conditioned ways, they forget where they came from. because we teach them like, this is table manners, this is how you go to bed, this is how you pray, this is how you that. I'm like, man, I look at Tarzan and I'm like, yo, that guy had it figured out. Like, I feel like if you were born in the woods and you made it to a certain age of where you could sustain, like, you'd be fine. And on a whole nother level, like communicating with animals, because that's what you were raised around. Like, I feel like there's so much potential to us as beings. When you talk about diving into that consciousness, I'm like, I've sat back when I felt so alone and just watching my dog. I know, not just him, most dogs, because I used to go to a lot of dog parks. I know what's going on. I can tell how our owner is by reading their dog's body language. You ever see somebody that's like, I'm like, your owner's an asshole. Like, clearly, I've seen that in cases where I know I have a friend that was like that. Like, he's a cool dude, but his dog is snappy. And I'm like, they literally learn it from you. They imprint the same way a child does when they're raised in this world. Dogs just look to their owners like, so we're gonna play. We play most of the time. You chill. You're mad. Like, for real, like, they just do what you do. Like, no joke. So I used to just sit back and like trip and like watch my dog, and I'm like, wow, I'm starting to get it. You know, people like talking about speaking to plants. Like, conversing is not always a conversation of hearing words. That's another construct and condition we had. I always thought that like people say, like, people who trip talk to plants. It doesn't always mean like they're like, hello, how are you doing? That's not, you coming in contact is a conversation. Touching is a conversation. Languages of love is a conversation. It's like, well, I everything for me is a conversation.
I want to, like, on the path here, I want to kind of pull off an I-4 real quick to just,
dope.
Here's the thing is this is one of the conversations that, again, I was like, oh man, I can't believe this is probably going to be a conversation on the podcast, but here we are. And now I'm just embracing it because it is what it is. And here we are, which is the misconstrued ideas that we have in our society about plant medicine and psychedelics as it pertains to what they're designed for. Let me first start by saying this. There are a lot of people who misuse, abuse the medicine, as I'm referring to it. And yes, there are people who get messed up, they get hurt, they end up in the hospital, they end up doing all those things. And it's not all like that. Like, that's the distinction for me between living an intentional versus an unintentional life, is knowing that whatever I'm doing, like, I have something that I am looking to bring forth, whether that's to become more in tune with myself, to experience love on a deeper level, to heal, and to get myself in a space where it's like, you know what, now I have to have these conversations. Like, sometimes it's just like, you know what it does is it literally is rewiring the neural pathways in your brain, because we're all just hardwiring. Who we are is very predictable. We're very predictable. Everything, it's like,
it's a habit.
It's programming, like the habits, and where that happens in the cerebellum. That's the seat of our subconscious. Like, this is straight neurology. You can't make this up. This is just how it be. Okay, we have way too much data. You look at an EEG, and like now you hear like all these studies about, like, you know, mushrooms being used in a medical context, and people who've had chronic depression for decades.
That's how they started. Most of this stuff started like that.
Yeah, now the research is public though. Like, that was getting like stuff down, and they're having people.
Niggas ain't have www.google searches. Like, this is like 60s, 50s, like where they were using LSD test programs. Like, what's her name? Well, they were doing the mushrooms, but the acid one had a name. It was a project. It was called it's on the tip of my tongue.
Is this the one with that, like, that
MK Ultra? MK Ultra. MK Ultra.
That sounds so familiar. I was gonna say, I don't know if you ever saw that video with that woman who's like a housewife, and they had this like guy talking on like this, and they said a regular housewife comes in and takes LSD, and they like do a video of her, and they show her like before and after. And did you see that video?
Bro, I've seen so many. I don't think I've seen that one. More of the specimen. Well, was it just her, or a study on a couple people?
No, it was just one woman, and it was like this guy sitting down with her, and he was just like, oh, you know, this where we administer this many micrograms, and this is what she did. And then he takes it, and then like they fast forward it to a little bit later, and it's like, how do you feel? And she's just like, it's everything. She's like kind of having the experience, right? Like, of everything that's kind of going on. And he's just like, well, can you explain it? She's like, I don't think, she's like, you're going to have to see this for yourself. Like,
yeah,
it's just something like, no words. There's no words for that.
Literally,
I digress.
They wanted to use it for mind control. That was the intention initially. They were like, oh, we could break down the enemy's minds and then we could control them. And they tested it. found that it actually freed them more than anything. And they were like, we can't have that. We were looking for the opposite of that.
How do we undo and they're like, what's the
Yeah.
180 flip of this? They're like going into
Literally.
their film editing software, flip. How do I flip this? Like,
That's like you going into sex with a condom, like, the intent is no baby, I got protection on, and then you get a kid out there and you're like, this is the exact opposite of what I was going for.
I thought I did my due
diligence.
Man. But circling it back though, I think that that's like something that's got to be demystified, is this, you know, yes, there are people using it and, you know, improperly and things like that, but for many of, you know, us and people who've used it, people who've thought about it, by the way, I don't endorse the use of it. I don't endorse the use of psychedelics. I don't endorse the use of plant medicine. I think it's one of those things that if it calls to you and you've you know, it's kind of found its way to you, then do it, but do it with intention. But there has,
people don't even know what that word means. They just say it.
Yeah, it's just like it's a buzzword, right? Meditation's a buzzword. So
quick caveat, speaking on intention, for the start of what you even said when you were explaining it, most of these people who abuse it or use it the wrong way, intention speaks so much to me, because most of those people off rip call it a drug. And what are we conditioned to think drugs are for? To fix problems, or which drugs don't even fix problems, they just cover down the symptoms, but neither here nor there. They're referring to it as a drug, period. In their intentions, knowing what they know drugs are in their mind, they're portraying it as when they speak of it as a drug. So no matter how you try to use it, at that point, you already labeled it with your words of what it is. Yeah. You're saying it's a drug, compared to somebody who comes to you like, this is medicine. Clearly, we in two different realms. We're talking about the same thing, but in completely two different ways. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So that was one thing that stuck out for me. Most of those people who are not doing the right thing with it, or not the people who are like, oh, it's medicine, and they're ending up like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. That's part of the intention, knowing your words and what you're saying. Pay attention to what you are saying. You build realities with these things. If you're referring it to it as such, it is going to be. If you call it this, it's going to be that.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's all about the context that you're operating from. If your context is, woo, let's get messed up, like let's get jacked up, woo, like having a good ass, you know, time with my friends, like that's distinctly different from, like we said, like going and knowing that it's medicine and that it's going to probably show you some real unsavory crap. You're gonna have to face yourself in ways. Yeah, you're shedding off layers. It's like the journey where you're like, kind of, you know, going through the uptick of the wave that is the experience, and then you get to the top, and like that's when it's like the butterfly in the cocoon analogy, where it's like it has to like fight its way out and it has to crack, and it's like it's resisting, and it's like, come on, like I have to do this, I have to keep fighting, because on the other side of that, like it doesn't know what's going to turn into, but eventually once you've kind of gotten through that fight, you get to the space where you finally crack open, you're like, oh wow, like here I am, like this metamorphosis has occurred. But that only comes with the correct intention.
Yeah.
It's said another way, it's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. I think most people who consider medicine already have, for the most part, not everyone, but kind of have that intention already in place of what they're doing. You saying it's medicine, clearly you're trying to heal something. You know what I'm saying? If you're saying it's a drug, it's like, it's up in the air.
Well, as you mentioned, drugs are, they're designed not to fix the problem, but to suppress the problem. Oh, it's like we live in a sweep things under the rug society. Like we don't want to look at our garbage. We'd much rather just, drink obsessively, because like I hate my job, I hate my life, and I go and I spend all my extra money on the weekends, like getting jacked up, listening to music, and not that there's anything wrong with going out and having a drink, but when it's unconsciously used as a way to deal with the inner pain, as the analogy that I've been using is
not even deal with, to push to the side, because you're not dealing with it. You're like trying to avoid it. A sense of avoidance. Like I'm having this distinction in my mind as we're speaking. I'm like, revelation, drug versus medicine, right there. Like you just drop those two words on some people, and just think about that. Like the person, those people going out to do those things, they're taking a drug. They're trying to suppress, like what people take pills, suppress what they're feeling, the symptoms. So you're taking it just to forget about the night and working this. You're not really dealing with it. You're just kind of like ignoring it for now. It just puts it to the back of my mind. Whereas like the medicine, when you take medicine, you're like, I'm trying to heal, step forward with this, and never have to deal with this. certain part again, so we can find something else that I use the medicine on. You know what I'm saying? And that I feel like is the difference. People who are going to take it are going to, I'm going to take this medicine. They're going and they're facing those things, not running away or like, let's get distracted. Like, all right, time to sit down with myself and face those things on the medicine. It's bringing me here. I'm like, man, drug versus medicine. You could name that our Big Man.
It's funny. The thing that I was about to say that ties it so perfectly together is drug versus medicine. But I was going to say is one is meant to fill a hole and the other is designed to help you feel whole. Drug versus medicine. Yeah.
Flames.
Yeah. Drug versus medicine. The
Flames.
drug is designed to fill a hole, right? We like this. It's a conceptual hole, of course, but on an energetic level, there's something that's not being met. So for example, me, fear of loneliness and abandonment, that hole is, well, let me go and put myself in a relationship with somebody and depend on them for the love that I'm not giving myself.
Yeah.
Let me unconsciously put that. And here's the thing. I think I put a post out today about this was you can't have, my coach said this to me, I thought it was brilliant. He said that you can't have two things in the same place. That is physics.
You can't think two thoughts at the same time. It doesn't work like that.
You can't say, I intend for love, but if what's present is fear, then that's what you get. It's like looking into your closet and saying, oh man, like I really want to set up a little studio there. Let me set up a studio on top of all my laundry and all my clothes. No. The first thing you have to do is you have to clean out your closet, as Eminem said, cleaning out my closet. Like you got to go in there and you got to clean out your closet. Like first you have to clear and get everything out of the way before you can even set up this new intention, this idea.
Move anything in there should have come cluttered. You don't know what's what.
Yeah. And then it ends up frustrating you and then you end up getting angry. So for me to come in and be like, oh, I want to have this loving relationship when the thing that's really there is fear of abandonment. The thing that's going to keep coming out is fear of abandonment. And sure.
Abandonment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That's what's going to be present up front. That's filling the hole. But for me now it's, okay, I notice this now. I have this awareness and man, it's like so much work, but I'm meditating every single day. I'm doing breath work every single day. I'm working out every single day. I'm seeing a cranial sacral therapist. I'm doing my own energy work. I'm constantly having conversations with people about this thing because I know the more that I presence it, the more that some part of me realizes, you know what, like it's okay to be seen. It's okay for this part to be there because inherently it's a part of me and I've done so good at making it wrong for so long that it continues to latch on harder and harder and harder. But when you go from seeking a drug that is a relationship to I'm seeking wholeness, I'm coming back home.
To myself, self-produced. I'm the manufacturer. I don't have to count on nobody for that.
I am my own pharmacy.
For real. With all the medicine. Plant-based, holistic. No drugs over here. For real. Wow. This is nice. These are the conversations that people want to have. They're definitely easier done in person. I'm a very in-person type of person, you know that. Your line of work is causing you, I mean, I know you're an in-person type person, but you're causing to have to do this over like, via Zoom or whatever right now. I'm looking forward to watching it grow and you sitting down with people, me being there on some, us following up years from now, touching back on like, let's look at that one to where we're at now. It's always the best part for me is the reflection. I wanted to talk about whenever inspirational people, I don't go for the rah-rah or none of that, or even like I've listened to like a lot of Ram Dass stuff that people don't know about. Like I send you guys the ET stuff, but like the deeper stuff, I'm like, a lot of people are just not there. Like I barely get people to watch the ET stuff. They're like, that's too long.
Ram Dass is good.
I'm like, he's talking. I'm like,
ET stuff is good. He's a lot of rah-rah for me, and that's why I love his work. He's great. Like, but I couldn't listen to like 30 minutes to an hour of it.
Yeah. Well, no, he has a podcast. I don't know if you've ever listened to his podcast. And then you get to hear him bounce off of like history under individuals who have helped him come this far and where they're at in their journey. Like how everyone's pretty much a king in their own suit. But on this scale of like being the motivational speaker, being that like that golden child, that's his space. And they understand that. They support him wholeheartedly, which is one of the roles I want to be able to play for you. Like, I feel like some people would see me as the ET, but I really don't think I want to do that. I'm like, I could see J-Rock being like more of the ET, not in the sense of how he speaks, but what he's doing, the approach he's taking at reaching people. And I support him in doing that in a way, if I could. That's why I was asking, like, how could I help? I feel like I could do that work, but it's not there right now. I'm not feeling it. And I'm not one of those people that's just like, do it because it's a good thing to do. We've had this conversation different ways multiple times. I'm just like, we should be. I'm like, if it ain't really you, even if it ain't really you for the moment, it may be you later. You don't want to really like force it too much, I feel. At least for me. Everyone's path is different. Some people force it and it works. I'm always, shit is that much, let it go. So when I'm talking about the rah-rahs and the shamans and Ram Dass people that I listen to, they make whatever I think is a lot of work seem in comparison. And it hits me every time. Like when you're surrounded around people who are not really working as hard as you know, your mentors might be in one sense, or your other mentees that you're working with and stuff like that. But when you see somebody who's done it on a grand scale and they're like, man, Buddhist thing every day was we was eating rice from 4 to 5, one meal a day, fasted on Tuesdays, and you know, like didn't walk around in shoes. All we did was like from we woke up at like 4 or 5, take till 5 or 6, and learn, you know, mantras and stuff like that. And they're like, they did that for like 5 years. We're sitting here complaining because we are very spoiled. That's another reoccurring theme of like, man, we don't know how good we got it in America. People want to cry about this corona shit right now. Like corona in a sense of like measles or whatever other epidemic that came or pandemic that was wiping us out. We've always kind of been at the forefront of it, or had enough money to sit at the table with the forefront people designing it, you know, the medicine or whatever they're given to heal it, that like we always get it first and then we get back to normal. But what about those countries that can't afford it? Like barely have running water. They're gonna worry about what can, like, you know, how they're gonna fight Ebola or, you know, corona and stuff like that. Like we've got it so fucking good. And then the second they show us one thing, we think that everything's so bad and that we don't have it that good. It's like, yo, I sent you that video the other day. Like, we're technically rich. When you talk about the whole population in the world, what we make money wise, we're technically rich, literally. But if you grew up in America watching on TV, famous people and all that, then you would think that you're poor. It's like, you need to go see the world a little bit and explore. Just, man, travels. I'm looking forward to travels with you guys, travels by myself. But that's always been the most eye-opening experience for me. And we still haven't really sat down and kicked it on like, how is it going around the US? I know you had your ups and downs relationship wise, but I knew the amount of growth, or I had a picture of the amount of growth that you would get. And I really want to sit down and talk about that. Like,
Oh, around the country.
Yeah, what can you remember from, you know, kind of just little smallly conversing with me beforehand, your thought process where you was at, to stepping out after and then being like, did you have any epiphanies? Did anything I say like come, you know, I never wanted to like wish bad on your relationship. I just told you that you guys would grow differently out there. Like things would just be different.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I didn't want to say it, but I had the feeling that you guys wouldn't be together when you got back. But I didn't wish that, and I would never put that out there into the world. I was just like, you guys gonna see some things. I know being out on the road, like, man, the amount of reflection, you sitting there in nature, you taking cold showers, like in the Pacific Ocean type shit, like, you're gonna start thinking differently. And like, they're gonna have their own sets of kind of experience that are Pacific Ocean eye-opening for them, that are gonna, you know, tip them in certain ways. And like, you might come to the end of it like, wow, we both really still like each other and like know each other to a sense, know ourselves to an extent that we see that we still like the same things in each other. Like we have a lot in common and we could grow together. And I was just like, I mean, I was hoping for it, but I was like, you're gonna get what you need out of it. The growth is gonna come, like, in whatever happens, it was meant to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yeah, I'm still curious of like, you got back and then I didn't even know you guys were broken up. And like, you know, how was that?
Yeah.
What did you see that coming? Did you never see that coming? Did it completely shock you? Did you have a feeling? Like, where were you?
Sure. So 6 months, that was a lot. So the journey in and of itself started off very full of uncertainty in that we didn't have a plan when we left. We didn't even know where we were going. We knew that the major place we were going was to Electric Forest.
Mm.
And outside of that, we didn't have a plan. A lot of it was very like off the cuff until we got all the way to Chicago. That was when we actually started to make and formulate a plan. What ended up happening was, Mike,
It's hard.
how much of this should I actually share? Because it's like, someone else is involved as well. So I have to like be like mindful and considerate of that person. But
Of course.
what ended up happening was when you spend enough time with somebody in a confined location and you don't set up structures that are designed to like give you the space that you need to do your own personal growth, because I really adhere to the whole principle that it's like each of us have a playground. We have our own, what I call it, space. I love the word space. It's like our own little like bubble. It's like when you were
I
kids.
like playground. I like
Yeah.
playground. I've
Yeah.
always said space, like your sacred space, but playground sounds nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you have our own playground. Like in my playground, if you were to come to my playground, you'd see hand balancing canes. You'd see what else would you see? You'd see a yoga wheel. You'd see a staff because I spin staff. You see some animal flow. You would see some masks and some glowy things. Like you see a variety of things in my playground, right? And then what ends up happening is sometimes at some point you find yourself wanting to go and play in someone else's playground. Maybe you decide you're gonna have an intimate relationship, right? So like you and I, we have a playground. Like you have a playground, I have a playground. You have the things that you enjoy, I have things that we enjoy, and then when we come together, now we have what I call the third entity playground, and that is a collection of what we're creating. And it's in a sense, you actually leave behind, if done properly, you actually leave behind your identity and you
Your
create.
own playground.
Yeah, it's really meant to be its own space. Sure, like you bring aspects of yourself to it, but there's a certain underlying assumption that you're going to kind of create something new in this third entity. And the failure that was made for myself, and probably what most relationships end up being, is it's going back to the whole like underlying codependency. If you're not really conscious of that, like that's already in the space, right? So like you're not really coming as nothing into the playground. You already have all your
Like, look, I dug a big ass hole. I need you to jump in it so we can move forward.
Exactly. I need you to jump in that hole, fill it for me. And then when you don't, I'm pissed off at you because that was your job, but I didn't tell you that because I didn't know. I didn't even know that that was the job I was.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was something to tell you, that I was like signing you up for that.
Yeah. So welcome. You've been enlisted and you get shipped out today, and you're welcome.
Yeah. No forewarning.
Forewarning.
For real.
So
no, I really, you don't have to speak much on her. I just wanted to know if you had any epiphanies or thoughts of me out there, more so.
Thoughts of you?
Yeah.
You so selfish. Listen.
I know. Yeah, I'm honest though. I'm like,
you're so self-absorbed. Look, so here's the thing. In relationship itself, we ended up going through this like patch where we didn't actually tend to our own independent playgrounds. And because of that, you get to that point where, and I'm sure everyone's been there, when you just start coming up with shit to get pissed off about. What can I possibly?
You wore dirty shoes to the playground. You know you're not supposed to wear dirty shoes to the
What
playground.
did I tell you about not putting the sandcastle builder thing back where I put it when I originally had put it? I said put my books back. Why do you keep leaving dishes in the sink? Can you please stop?
Sounds like me and my mom. Sounds like my life.
Just making up things to get pissed off about. That's what ended up becoming.
Yo, quick caveat. I just have to share this just to give people a small snippet of like my life. My mom calls me, right? She's like, call for two things.
Oh boy.
She's like, literally like, you got to pay that one thing. So I'll fax that over for you for when you was down in Florida. And they sent it in the mail. And then there's another one that, that's one, you got to pay it. And two, she's paying it for me because I don't have it right now. And I'm going to give it back to her. She's like, I'll send you, the $300 Venmo. You just have to tell me how to do it. That's the second thing. I'm like, okay, don't worry about fax, like sending me a screen picture because I'm coming in like 2 days. Yeah, I'll just see it when I get there. And then two, this is how I'll tell you how to Venmo the money. And she's like, well, why you got it? I'm like, I'm literally just doing what you called me and told me that you wanted to do. And now I'm saying, let's do it. And she's ready to chew my head off for it. Because money's always been a sensitive place for my family. Like it just is fear built around it, constructs, whatever. Like money is always a thing, even if it's there. It's like, you know what I'm saying? So like, it's just real
We have a million.
touchy.
We don't have 1,000,010.
Yeah, like some like it was just ironic to me. Like I'm like literally like I'm telling you how to send the money because you told me that's what you one of the things you called me for, and then I'm kind of getting backlash like why I gotta like I'm like it's what you said you wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? I'm like I can't even right now. She started like talking about going on a tangent about stuff about herself, and I'm like, how do we end up here? Because like my sister's a nurse and working, and she was kind of sick for a couple of days. We don't have no corona over here, but like she's got sick for a couple of days, and I'm like, that's what she said. She was like, don't come home without corona. I'm like, I'm corona free. I don't believe I have corona. And you know, since my sister was sick, she's like, yep, you know, like your sister's been over there. My sister lives 3 blocks away. She's like, I drive by and like wave at the house. You know what I'm saying? Like not going in there. And I'm like, I got you, Ma. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I just have a different view. You know, like for me, my mom's always raised me like she would take a bullet for her kids type thing. Like that's that kind of loyal. And I have that because of her. So like to hear her say that, granted she's old and you know, in her older age, and that's mostly the people, and she's asthmatic as well. So it wouldn't be a good setting for her. Just the way that it was coming off. I'm just like, for me, if I have children and they're sick and there's a possibility I can get sick of it, it's like it's not even a question. You know, I can't really, these are the deep conversations I can't really have with my mom, but I'm like, my sister died tomorrow. She'd be sad she didn't see her today in person. You know what I'm saying? You'd be like, damn, it was about a week before I touched her last, or 2 weeks, because I was avoiding, trying to protect myself. That's that fear that we always have, like that like, oh, the me. I'm like, until something happens that's outside of you, bigger than you, it makes you really think back to the selfish you that you were sitting at that spot. Like, damn. And I constantly try to like show these things or have these talks with my mom, and it's like she don't want to go there. Most people don't want to get in the fields and get really deep. It always becomes like she victimizes herself when she's done so well on her own, you know, making triple figures as a lady who's been alone from she was 16. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, you're such in a queen position, but you don't even see it because these constructed in ways that we're programmed of lack, of we're doing always want more. It's just not enough. I'm like, you're in such a good spot. Like you've done so much for yourself. You know how much people have moved at 16 and like went out starving on the streets begging for food? Like you've done amazing, raised 2 great kids. One that's trying to have you introspect and bring something to you to think about. And my mom's just like, it always becomes one of those, when I was this and I'm like, I lose you every time. It's literally one of the most frustrating things because it's like, it reminds me of like when she was telling me things as a kid, like you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And granted, we were kids and didn't adhere by it and learned the lessons the hard way and come back like, damn, Mom, you was right. But now the shoe is on the other foot. And since I'm about half the age, half the time on earth, and you've been in your ways about double my time on this earth of how you've been doing things, it's like your way is like, there's no way it's right. If there was another right way, I would have found it already. And I'm like, you don't even got to try it. Just listen to what I got to say and like, just think about it. We can't even get there. Because then like her mind, like I do it too, not as much anymore, but we have these safety mechanisms. And I sit there and I study everybody I'm around because I'm like, I'm an imprint of her. So like I notice things now. Like when I try to get into a deep conversation, my mom will just start singing a song that she likes. And I'm like, wow, ignorance by music. Who does this? This guy, like, huh? What you were saying? So, like, when there's a deep conversation, somebody going somewhere or something I don't want to talk about, and it's like I don't even notice. That's the part of the conditioning. I don't do it intentionally. I'm not trying to ignore you. And that's where awareness comes in your journey. But I always like find myself. I thought back, and I'm like, wow, I do that a lot. And then you get a good mirror, very good mirror, like my partner now, that points that out to you. And at first you're like, I don't do that. I'm like, oh shit. Happens a couple more times. She keeps pointing it out. You're like, yeah, I do.
I don't like that one. Why'd you gotta point that one out?
I'm like, why do I do that? And then I go home. Like literally, I have that question, like, why do I do that? I go home the next day and literally, boom, happens with my mom. And I'm like, that's it. There you go. And then I put that in the bank. Like, remember that. This is the remembrance. Like now you see where you come from. If I had completely forgotten about yesterday, in that lesson, I wouldn't have got to see this now, because she's been doing this her whole life. I just never noticed it.
Yeah.
I just do it too. It's just like, it's just what it is. But I'm like, no, that's like, oh, that's uncomfortable. My mom's not really huggy, lovey, touchy. And that's what's made me so much like that. I'm like, my mom loved me, don't get me wrong, but love I felt I should have had as a kid, that unconditional, like, it just wasn't there. She worked most of the time, 3 to 11, my whole life. That's why I threw parties and had my friends over, and like, I was all about my friends. Like, my friends are family. I had that concept long before anything. And like, when I came home for my mom's 50th, my sister said it about her gym buddies. She's been going to gym with these people for like 10 years. I remember back when she like probably still lived with us at the time, and she was going to this gym, and my family's just very like, I know who I know. I have my friends already. I don't really need anybody else. No new people, no new friends, no new friends. And I mean, it's scared of getting hurt. Somebody's done them wrong in the past. It's happened to my mother with her best friend, my sister with her best friends. I don't really think it's happening. It didn't happen to me with my best friends growing up that I considered family, but later on in Savannah, making new friends and having them do these things. And I was just like, wow, that's when you start to reflect on it. Like, this is the stuff I've kind of dished out. Like, like I'm saying I've wronged my friends. And then to come back and I'm like, at those times when you're sitting there, like, why would this person do this to me? There's such a bigger picture and scheme of things going on. You're thinking that like, you didn't do them wrong, so they shouldn't do you wrong. But you're not thinking about the fact they've also been done probably wrong by other people. That's where they've learned the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They've also done other people wrong. And then you've also wronged people in other places in your life. Like, nobody's a freaking saint. You know what I'm saying? Like, it all stems from somewhere. So just so it didn't happen for a while, a lot of my karma used to be on pause. And now with where I'm at, it's very instant karma, or at least for me being in this awareness to see it now. I couldn't see it back then. I was just like, man, I feel like, maybe it was being shown to me when I was younger, but I was so ignorant. I wasn't looking at it as that. So it keeps happening like anything else, running cycles and cycles until you sudden cracks and you're like, oh, I get it now. Yeah, I don't need to see that again. But yeah, it was just a lot, man. Like, I'm sitting here opening up on the pod, letting people know.
It's a therapy session. That's what this has been about. We just out here pouring our guts out.
This is not really hard for me. I've been doing this now for about, since my journey started, for the last 3 years. I've been pretty open. If somebody asks, I'll say, I feel like this one will actually do a lot of good though, because usually it's just a one-on-one or a kind of small group. I feel like with what you're doing in your work and it being sent out, like, a lot of people will get to see this, and that'll be pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. It'll ripple off from there, showing more people, and just like, damn.
Well, if anything, I hope that this is like, it just creates reflections for people, because ultimately one of the things that I'm embodying now is I had this like fear of like, oh man, if I start this podcast, like I really have to, the stereotype, well, you have to put yourself as an expert and everything. But what I realize is that my expertise right now is just becoming myself and holding up mirrors so that other people can see within themselves and have a choice. Because if you don't know, you don't have
always though. I think that's always your expertise is like figuring out yourself. You can stem any battle or anything you're getting through in life to just that. Like, you were talking about leaving for your journey to Florida. You were like, we didn't plan anything. It's like, how could you plan for something you know nothing about? Literally, people could tell you their stories and how their experience is going to be, but yours is not going to be theirs. You couldn't really plan for that. You don't know. And then as you got along and kind of got a flow, you're like, all right, kind of figured some things out of being on the road. Now you could plan accordingly. And it's probably still not going to be to the T, because things are still going to be changing and you're going different places, but you got semi of a structure of how to deal with it. Our life is built off of like familiarity, this illusion we live in, or it's literally scientific. Like, our brain shows us what it's seen so much in the past. Like, it's running off of predictions. So there's a thing I'll send to you. It's called like the mass something. I can't remember, but literally by the time we're 7s, reticular activation stops and we start to see everything, or reticular activation starts, sorry. And we start to see everything of how we've seen it in the past. Like, I know what's going to happen. That's what your brain literally starts doing. So in this mask, you're looking at it and it's flipping and it's protruded out towards you. And when it turns around, you're supposed to see it indented in, but instead it pops back out. I'm going to send it to you. If you show it to a kid under 7 or 6 or so, they'll see it indented in. Their brain is showing them like it popped out and it's indented in. Us, since we've seen it so much, we think it's going to be like that, and it shows us that what we thought was wrong. Like we're thinking we're gonna see it go in, and then it pops back out of us. You're like, why did it do that? It's supposed to be indented now, but it pops back out. Your brain's like, I've seen this 100 times. It's turning. I'm gonna see the back, and then you don't. You're like, huh? You know what I'm saying? And I've also done it on some plant medicines and looked at it, and I'm like, I see it now. I'm getting more back to that like non-predictive, in the flow consciousness of life. Like I'm just being. It's pretty cool. That was my little caveat. Sorry.
Straight up, I don't even know where this all started. I'm not even gonna front like what was that connecting to? Where were we going?
You were I mean, we had talked about I got back to your journey. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. Honestly though,
Oh, when you started this podcast, you were like, it was gonna be for this. But you couldn't plan it because you didn't know is what I was trying to say.
Well, it's funny, the way the podcast is structured now is people are like, first and foremost, when I said it was going to be longer format, like hour and a half, most people, well, not say most people, actually, most people didn't say anything, but a few people were like, no one's going to listen to that. And like the average podcast is this long. It was just like, I'm looking for a specific type of person. Like,
we're already over an hour and a half. I saw that. I was like, initially I didn't even really want to talk like myself. I didn't even want to talk for an hour and a half. Like just being by myself most of the day and just doing a lot of like my work and being with myself, like you get in this kind of selfish place. And you're like, I don't really want to talk to nobody for an hour and a half. I'm not really feeling it. And I'm telling you, make those excuses. And I'm like, everything comes down to a choice. And I was like, this one is for you. It's not even about me. And then on top of that, it's bigger than us. That's part of like the sacrifice with the choice. Like a lot of the times, there's things that you're not going to want to do, but those are the things that'll get you the results that you want, or something better looking, or something towards it. You know what I'm saying? Like the growth. That's where it's at. So I'm like, I'm thinking, my mind's like, it's going to be like this. I haven't even noticed that we were on the podcast for an hour and a half already. And I'm like, shit, I could probably go another hour and a half easy. You know what I'm saying? Just being in the moment, not thinking and portraying what I think it's going to be, connecting things to it. Like, oh man, I'm gonna be bored. We have nothing to talk about. Like,
damn, you had that? That was what happened in your brain. See, what happened in my brain was when I was laying on the couch, I had 3 podcasts scheduled today. 2 of them got canceled. And when those 2 got canceled, I'm already on like limited sleep. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to lay down for this little nap real quick. And then I'm going to get up for Moon's podcast. And then when I got your text, I thought you were for sure going to say, we're not doing it today. I was just like, all right, sweet, let's reschedule. I'm about to pass out. And you're like, all right, let's do it. And it was like 5 minutes. I was like, all right, we're doing this podcast. And just like threw on some music, got myself up, started dancing around because it's like, all right, let's go ahead and get this rolling.
I didn't think that we'd have nothing to talk about just because of who we are and our connection. And just me, I can always, you could drop a topic and I'm just like, I got a bunch of shit to say about that. You know what I'm saying? Like ball, hey, L dot, round, 360, circumference, degrees, everything consistent in there of like, what? I wasn't worried about that, but that's thoughts that a lot of people have. Like, hour and a half, what could you talk about for an hour and a half?
Mm-hmm.
It'll be funny how you'll be intrigued how time flies when you're just like literally in the moment. Like that felt like maybe 35, 45 minutes. Maybe an hour. It hasn't felt like an hour and 45 minutes is what we're going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, man, but it's good stuff. I enjoyed all of it. I'm happy to share my story with the world so far and help add to this build with you, brother. Following the wolf, feeding the wolf. Gotta feed the wolf on the playground.
We gotta also clean up all the shit out of our boxes, our playgrounds. We got to take care of our space. That's pretty much what a lot of this conversation has boiled down to. It's digging up and acknowledging and seeing all the skeletons, spreading the awareness. And then a lot of it's the tough part, the really tough part, you hear the word tossed around a lot, but it's being able to have like compassion for oneself and being able to see, to objectively see. That's the problem, is to be able to like objectively look at yourself in the mirror. And
you're like, son, you know not what you do.
What you do, you do not know. Therefore, you punishment. No punishment. You good. You're fine. It's there's just got to be a ridiculous level of compassion, being able to just like seem like, man, like, listening to say you or myself. It's my hope is that in me sharing all this crap that I really don't want to share, because it's just not pretty. At least like, and I acknowledge that for me, it's not pretty. I get that you're in a place, I don't care, whatever, damn. For me, I'm just like, man, I really don't want to share this because it's just like, it's not pretty. But at the same time, in doing that, it's releasing the venom. And my hope is that if nothing else, that somebody hears this and they feel more comfortable to do that, because ultimately, as long as you still have poison within you, it will get to every single cell of your body, and you will continue to manifest and produce the same results in life. Whether you don't like the word manifest or produce results, it's all the same. The end product of anything is a result. And if you don't like your results, you got to start paying attention to your input. And if you don't know what input you're putting in, then you need to start paying attention to the things that are unaware to oneself, because ultimately there is a puppet master, and either you are it or it is you, and it's going to take over and it will run your life if you don't. And that is the journey of self-discovery and self-awareness.
Man, I had another topic that came to mind. I was trying to drop real quick for the people.
Hear you people.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Got caught up in your words. I was like,
Yes, this is my language. You speak it. I understand. You said something earlier about, coming back to this conversation years later, being able to look at it. And one of the things that I'm becoming more publicly expressive about, because I realize what I speak is what I create, is, in the beginning of this journey, I'm just like, I realized at first that it's really about me finding this message and being able to hone it down so people can really understand it, because the long-term vision for this, like, podcast is actually more than a podcast. Like, I wanted to create a community, and this is a community of people who are committed to doing the work, the people who are willing to go into the darkness without a flashlight, because, that's what it takes. It takes being uncertain. It takes being in the unknown and having a commitment to ourselves. So what I've recently been saying, I've had a lot of people ask me like what my religion is and things like that. And what I've just landed on recently, fundamentally at the core of, is that love is my religion. And there's three main facets. It's love myself, love my people, and love my life. And as long as I'm doing good unto myself and unto others, then that to me is in alignment with what I'm wanting to create in this community, this Follow the Wolf community. I'll say it a million times. It's not about following me. It's not and it's about following that inner calling. It's about coming back home, coming back to self. And the long-term vision for this, man, I don't know if I've told you about this. I'm really pumped about it, is creating this, this is like a running title. I really don't know what it's going to be, but let's just say it's like a wolf den sanctuary. And the entire premise is going to be this beautiful facility where there's going to be different sections, and in one section there's a space for retreats and workshops, and people are coming in and sharing their medicine with people and being able to teach anything from energy work to massage therapy to all these different things, but ultimately designed to get the person back to self. One section. Another section is this functional training where you can work out and get a movement or animal flow or yoga or any kind of functional training that you can fit in there. And then another section designed for food and culinary, good, healthy foods. I have a friend who's an Ayurvedic chef. I got to talk to her about this, creating this hub, this space where people can get what they need and come as they are, a landing space for those people who are man, I'm not sure if I fit in, or I'm looking to find myself in a community with people who are going to see me, hear me, love me exactly as I am. That's what this podcast is about. Thank you, alarm. Not necessary. That's what this movement is about. Fundamentally at its core, come home to yourself and have a community who's there for you all the way.
Misfits,
but we fit in with the misfits, so we fit in perfect.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of compassion, that one just always hits home. Really learning to have compassion, of course, for others, but definitely with yourself.
I think the more you have with yourself, the more you have for others.
Yeah. There it really comes that that separation where you have to see that you're flawed, man. Your higher self knows that, though, that you are part of that higher self, and you can look down and be like, hey, I'm flawed, and you can take actions to fix choices, man. We are not our thoughts, but we are our choices. Seriously, that was one that I came to before. So everybody your thoughts, I'm your actions, I'm it's the choices you make. Literally everything is a choice. For real. Somebody has to choose to be with somebody for 30 years. Yo, you're worth it. And we are building, we're investing in each other. It's a choice. Just like the community. That's what we're gonna do. Feed the wolf.
So we
Feed the
do.
wolf.
You are enough. We are enough. I am enough. We are all enough.
Oh, I'll share my new mantras I came to. It used to be, I am love, I am light, I am God, but in the sense of like connection with my higher self. Not like,
I'm God.
I think of like when people say gods, then you make it plural. That's the separation for me. When you say God, like you're talking about that one, that whole, that everything that we are. Like, I am, so we are. Like, if God is everything, then wouldn't we be? You know what I'm saying? Like, just say it in reverse. Like, everything in existence is God.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be a part of the whole? You know what I'm saying? And it's like the Holy Trinity, or the three parts: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But that's another part. I just think those are different dimensional beings. But my new ones are: I am breath. Woo! Man, I've been sitting on that one for a while, but I haven't really been using it till now. I am one, and I am love. Literally. And then, like for me, I'll just give a quick breakdown. I say that if you were gonna call God something, it'd have to be breath, because literally, if you don't have oxygen, this illusion ceases to exist. This right here. Like, you stop breathing, you die. The one. That stems from the connection between all things, and more so felt now. Used to just be said back then. I'm like, I don't really get it. And then when you do, you're like, wow, like I feel you. I feel that. I feel your emotions. I feel the energy, the tension in the room. I feel how close we are. I feel the love. Like literally everything interconnected. This body, just the suit. People's minds kind of make the separation, but no, we're all linked. Feel that. And then of course there's love, to be interpreted however you may take it, whatever love is to you. And then I like that one and love kind of go together. It's Jamaican, so one love.
One love,
one love. I'm like, oh, hear the people cry.
All
Like,
right.
you know it when you feel that. When you hear that, you're like, yep, that's it. My favorite song by him right now is This Love. You ever deep in a trip, or you working on that, like that medicine and doing that work, play that song and see how that makes you feel. Cause like what he's evoked through that expression, and how many people I'm sure have connected to it. When I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, that's definitely love. Mm-hmm. That is definitely love. Like that's gotta be like in my darkest moments. That's another thing actually. On any of my trips, which were necessary, dark not being bad. I'm happy that they happened. Would have surely done them again. That's the one thing that's always saved me, honestly. And now coming to listen to his songs later and what he was about and what he was doing, that man was trying to take people back home. Like, you forgot who you were. One love. We are one love. You know, is this love? Yes, this life, this existence. You woke up today, be grateful. For real. You got breath, a meal, running water, shelter over your head. Man, like, yeah. Is this love? Is this love that I'm feeling? But yeah, every time I've gotten deep, he's the only thing I could hear. Music distorted, everything just sounding like noise and craziness. And Bob Marley would just come through clear as light. Boom. Like, wow. To know that it wasn't even him. We personified the being, but it was literally that light and that truth he was living, like shining through him, like transparent. Boom. Man, reaches me 50 years later, and I've never even met the man or heard him in person. You know what I'm saying? That's how you know it transcends more than just these physical beings. And that's how I know we're connected. I'm like, the love I feel when I'm listening to that music is more than most I've ever felt in my life. Meeting people and holding people and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? They weren't the ones that came to me when I was down there in that darkness, and then like just pulled me back up. That voice, him just being a messenger, a conduit, you would say, for the universal being or the whole, and delivering that message. I connected with that like crazy. Okay, sorry, that was it. One love.
I am that, we are that, my friend.
Let's get
Wise
together.
words of Marianne Williamson. It's all about the return to love, the return to
I've never
source.
heard that one. I'll
Yeah.
write that down. Another thing, did you write down what you said earlier? Make sure you write that down of drug and medicine. Put that in the notes in the journal of what you distinguished it
Whole
as.
versus whole.
Yeah, that'll be a topic for you later. A big one.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much fundamentally now what a lot of my core messages is a distinction between filling a hole and becoming whole, and how this message is about taking people who are feeling like they're consciously or unconsciously filling a hole, versus wanting to become whole. Because when we become whole, as you know, just kind of preaching the choir here, when we become whole, then we no longer need things outside of ourselves to validate something internally that we inherently always have. We just have to come home and remember and to love ourselves. And once we have that, then
it's catchy. Like it's like clickbait. Like I don't know how you work it or market it. Work that though. Like whole versus whole. That would, like, I would tap that every time. In all ways. However many ways, entendres you could think of. I tap that every time. Whole versus whole.
I can see that as a tagline on the website. Go from filling a hole to becoming whole, or something like that.
No, there is on a website.
No, I'm thinking like I could imagine that being a tagline or something like that.
No, just whole versus whole. I've learned like simplicity goes so far because it leaves people's mind to wander. And that's the best part about it. I love stuff like that. Like, I'm not saying that what you said is bad, but when you leave it out there for a thinkers like us will come in and be like, what does he mean? And how much different connections they can make just based off those two words. I'm only thinking of two right now, but I'm pretty sure there's more. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? Yeah, whole versus whole. Head cracker, as my brother Akeem would say. That's a head cracker. Like, boom. One of those head crackers, man. The first time he ever used the term head cracker to me, I'm just gonna drop this too. We were tripping hella hard. San Diego at OB. We're coming up to the pier, sitting on the rocks, watching the waves, looking at the sunset. It's like 6 o'clock. It's July 4th, I remember, because it was fireworks. And he's like, how do you know whether whether you're actually being present or just living in the moment? Like it's, bro, I just never knew he thought like that. Like that gave me a peek into his mind, and I was just like, I've never heard anything like that. How do you know? Because he was just sitting there, and so I can't paint the picture for everyone, but like he's just sitting here laid back on the rocks, like looking out towards the sunset. I'm tripping hella hard, so this is just looking like I don't even know. And he said that, and I was just like, my mind just gone. I didn't even have really thoughts. I just like, you got to tap into something greater for that. Like, how do you know you're just being present on living? Yeah, shout outs. Love everybody. I'll let you close up. Well, he's still thinking about it. Like, what?
In my mind, they haven't fully been distinguished. I'm like, that sounds like the same thing to me.
It does.
That's
the part that it would be distinguished as something separate, like when you think of it. But it's actually the same. It was just like, I was like, what?
No, she wasn't ready. He wasn't ready.
Shoes. Shoes is right.
Shoes is right. And back
that
to
was too much.
Here we are. We've come back.
For real, I was like, yeah, good stuff. I'm gonna hit him up. I got 30 minutes, 29 minutes yoga teacher training.
I gotta go.
I'll go out there and be a future yogi for you guys. Just trying to get some of these lessons from the community. Get these yoga lessons on the mat always.
These yoga hands.
For real. Always on the mat. I think that would be my podcast would be like on the mat. And I would just do podcasts of like people bringing their yoga mats and we're having a one-on-one. They're sitting on theirs, I'm sitting on mine. Because like for me, this is my playground. When you talk about playground now, where I lie most of the time, like I spend more time on the mat than anything else. Probably even rivaling a bed. Yeah, definitely more than a bed. Like, I spend more time on the mat. Stretching through the day, meditation, whatever. I just sit on the floor so I don't get like shorten up my hip flexors, sitting on the couch, like lay on the ground, flatten out the spine, whatever. On the mat is my playground. I find a lot of peace in this. Around. You know what? Okay, yeah, I'm just too much. We go. Yeah. All right, last piece. You know, I've been sleeping on the floor for about, probably about a year now. Probably more. I got rid of my bed because it was old and squeaky. It was a hand-me-down of a hand-me-down.
I didn't know you were sleeping on the floor.
And like, you know, I was reading. It was one of those in one of those Buddhist teachings, just telling them, you know, how they sleep on the floor pretty much every day, like whatever, but they don't have beds at the monasteries or whatever. They sleep on the floor, like monks. And it's become one of those things, like, it's just normal for me now. But when your ass touches a Tempur-Pedic, or just a bed period, like the amount of appreciation you have for something comfortable is like man, I'm so simplistic and I love it. I want to get to the point where I don't, like, you know, of course we don't need anything to be happy, but I'm like, the things that make me overzealously happy, and I don't like act out about it, but like inside make me like warm and fuzzy inside. I was like, the festival, that was all good, cool. If I could have one thing, it would just be waking up next to you guys every day. Those vibes, that camaraderie, us hanging out as a group, just that. And then my time to go off into my playground, of course, but that every day, like that was the most simplest thing I could ask for. And it's reasonable. Like we could actually, that's tangible and could reach very soon.
Oh, that's because it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, man, that's what I was geeking about. Anytime anyone probably called me, I'm like, man, we're going to be living together and we're going to meet more people like that. The vibe just growing that light, just shining out. People's like, I want some of that so I can find my light and bring more light to it. Like, yeah, I was like, the music's cool, festival's cool. Like, we could do this shit anywhere.
Just throw on a speaker with some nasty music. You can have that anywhere, anytime.
You didn't even need the music. Just sitting down talking like we're doing that. Like,
I mean, that's true. But I mean, just from that context of the festival. Hell, though, if you think about it, you know, at the festival, it's like there's music, there's workshops and everything. I'm like, we could. So that's one of the small things we haven't talked about. That's something to do offline. But I actually want to start doing our own small version of that. It's like put together a little mini workshop, put on some music, like have people do like ecstatic dance, like you have them go through movements and things like that, and you get some Reiki and some massage therapy. Like I'm kind of like teaching myself, like you can just like get right. So yeah.
That gave me an idea. I'm not gonna say on this podcast.
We'll talk later, man.
We'll talk.
This thing has got to end. The people are like, man, people turned out like, if anyone's listened this far at this point, they're just like, man, these fools, they just shut up, end the podcast already. Anyways.
Great things to come. I'm gonna hit you back on this after my teacher training tonight. Should be done around probably 8:30. We're gonna be on Zoom for like 3 hours. Another one of those things. I'm like, do I want to be on? I just got off this call for 2 hours. Do I want to be on Zoom for 3 hours with my group? And then the second I sit there with them, the collective of us is just mesmerizing, and you can't get it anywhere else. And every time I'm like, this is why I do this. It's so worth it. And then the healing that's coming from it for everyone, and how that seed sprinkles out to everyone that we're in touch with in our lives individually, I'm like, yeah. But thinking on it, I'm like, I don't want to sit there for 3 hours. It's just the mind, though. All a choice. I could just be like, no, I'm not going. But I choose to, you know. Mm-hmm. And I never regret the choice. So, got it.
We can absolutely acknowledge and say, I don't feel like it, but I choose to. I don't feel like doing the dishes, but I choose to. I don't feel like having this ugly conversation with my partner, but I choose to, because of the grander commitment that we have.
It's always worth it. It sucks. Like, it only sucks in thought. It's always great, at least for me, even through those shitty conversations. Like, I was enjoying it when I was having it with my partner, because I'm just like, this, as everything else, will pass. Like, she doesn't see it yet right now where she's at in the feelings, but I'm like, it's gonna pass. It always does. Like, that's just life. It never just stays right here. At least not my life. For real. Like, shit, just, we got it out in the air and it'll pass, just like everything else.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, I'm like, this sucks. I hate hearing about this, but it's a part of it. I knew it would be. And, you know, now we're like much closer than ever. We've been doing the Wim Hof breathing. We do it
Yeah.
together. So we do the meditation and then we get in a cold shower together. And like literally since she's so cold, I just hold her, you know, like a warm embrace in the midst of this freezing water. But like it physically brings us closer and on other levels, but it's spiritually, but just holding her. And I know she yearns for that. You know, she's whole as a being, but she also knows her faults underlying with what most people have is probably like family issues, parental issues on either side or the other. You know what I'm saying? Like she's aware of that. And it's just like, man, I don't need it, but as my partner, like, you know, this thing would make me happy or really like help with the process. Give that. And it was one of those moments in there. Every night I get to hold her. I'm like, yes, I get to do this for 38 more days. It really makes her feel good. It makes me feel good that she's feeling good. Like, yeah, more people need to do this. Get in on this. How much people have been actually doing it? Because we're supposed to hold each other accountable. I'm like,
I don't know. I have to check, honestly. I don't know. Again, conversation for offline, but I think there's some
gotcha.
people doing it. I know I'm doing it, so that's what matters.
Doing it wild. All right, yeah, we ended on a great one.
But dude, I
Never
love
really
you.
ends. Just continues elsewhere.
It's gonna as soon as I hit stop, it's gonna keep going. But for those who are listening, they're like, all right, I'm clicking off now. Amun, I
That's
love you
life.
so much, friend. I love you.
Love you. Love you too, brother.
So
Fellow king of mine.
to all the kings,
Oh,
queens,
slobber.
celestial beings, distractions, and everything else in between. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning in. If you've made it this far, you are a warrior and you're a champion. I appreciate you so, so, so much. And yeah, keep coming back home. And thank you for choosing to follow the wolf. Peace.
Love you, kings and queens.